Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Come on in. Get a seat. Okay. How's everybody doing? We all go outside, get a big circle. Is glass outside today? Be good, wouldn't it? I heard somewhere it's Jason's birthday today. And happy birthday, Jason. Is it a big one? 30. He's 30. 30 is really old. Okay. One other thing I want to say before we get started today, too. So, I want to make sure that there's this phenomenon that happens in every class. You guys probably know it, right? It's kind of creeping, desk rustling, and everything happens at the very end of class, right? So there's like 5 minutes left, and everybody's starting to pack up, and so it's kind of annoying, right? Probably did some of you who want to stay and listen. So let's try not to do that. What's really interesting about this classroom is there's a clock right there. So this is the official time clock. So it's 9:33, it says here. So we stop at 9:50, right? And we go that long every day, which is most of the times we do. So let's try not to kind of get too antsy at the end so that we can get through everything. A lot of times they're going to kind of rush and say something, some kind of summary statement there at the end. But we got the official timepiece there. So what I want to do today is continue talking about Freud and his really fascinating and influential ideas, right? And again, I want to make sure that we know that when we're, particularly in this next section, where we're talking about personality theories. These are theories, right? What I'm telling you is what these people think is going on. It doesn't mean that that's supported by the data. It doesn't mean that, right, that's what's true, but these are these people's ideas about what's going on. And they're all, what's so interesting about these personality theories is they reveal kind of these deep-seated differences about, almost philosophical differences about the nature of people, what drives people, what is going on in them, and sort of what's the essential nature of humans. And so it's interesting that they have to, again, start from different places and develop these theories that have this kind of coherence to them. So I talk about them as if they're kind of real, but they are theories. So we're going to talk about now is really the next part of Freud's ideas. It really lays out how the sort of processes we talked about last time manifest themselves in individual differences, make people different people with different personality types, different personality quirks and problems sometimes. We're going to talk about his theory of growth and development. Really, this is his idea about psychosexual stages. We'll talk about fixation regression, about the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex, is really interesting ideas that he had about the development of sexuals, about the superego and conscience. Then we'll talk a little bit at the end about kind of the tricks of psychoanalysis, some of the ways that, a little bit about theory, a little bit about therapy, a little bit about some of the techniques that he used, like dream analysis and projective tests, and a quick criticism at the end. Get your clickers, so I'll answer a couple questions here at the beginning. No. Clicker must be out of battery. Here's the question. I can do it by hand. Oh, I didn't know what I didn't do. I know, sorry guys. I didn't turn on the clicker. Battery. Me. glitch here. Okay, so here's the question. Did you find Freud's ideas about psychological functioning ring true? Did they sound right to you? Yes, no, kinda, or gee, I was in lecture on Tuesdays, and cool, these clickers are anonymous, right? So go ahead and tell me which you think is true. Did you basically think, yeah, this kind of ring true, I got it, or oh, it's complete BS, that just didn't sound right at all, or you know, kind of sounded right, kind of not right. So let me know how you felt about it. Must be a sunny day, don't low attendance. Yeah. So people go for the kind of response, right? Is that always in the middle? So some people thought it ring true, some people didn't. I like E. It's always my favorite response. Okay, so you guys, yeah, kind of. How about this one? I want to just kind of make sure you understand something. So according to Freud, what is the primary driving motivation behind human behavior? Is it the desire to conform to society's moral standards? Is it the desire for sexual gratification? Is it the desire to gratify instinctual desires related to survival and procreation? Or is it the desire to have a full beard? So let me know what you think. So what do you think is, he does have a really, really full beard. Have you ever seen Freud's beard? Perfect. Love it. I aspire to that beard all the time. Okay, so did you think it's the desire to conform to society's moral standards, the desire for sexual gratification? What's the core motivation? What does you think drives people? What's that central sort of notion, which is really one of the central ways that these personality theories kind of differ? Right? What they think drives people? What's the core human motivation? Okay, giving it up, you guys are too slow. Late response. Okay, so the desire, so overwhelmingly people are saying C, which is really the right answer, right? So it's the desire to gratify these instinctual desires. Now, again, that's what the reason I bring this up partly is I want to talk about these central motivations, but this is one of the things that people get confused a little bit about. When Freud talks, he talks a lot about sex, and we're going to talk about sex today, right? About sexual desire and the role that plays, but that's not just what he's talking about here. When he's talking about core motivation, it's everything. It's that people are built, are essentially these animals that are built with these instinctual desires to gratify their needs that are needed for survival and procreation. So this drive to need water and food and sex and the things that the sort of core animal desires that people have. Right? So if you remember, we talked about these four dimensions: motivation and structure and growth and development and psychotherapy that all personality theories have. So yesterday we really went through those first two kind of ideas, right? So this core human motivation that he says that people are driven by these instinctual desires and this notion of people's energy systems, right? So there's this motivation, there's this desire to gratify things that all organisms have to have, but that sometimes gets derailed, right? But even when those wishes aren't fulfilled, that energy still has to go somewhere, and that's where the interesting stuff goes on, right? So these core motivations that then play themselves out in these structural elements. So these theories have these structural elements. So in Freudian theory, it's the id, the ego, and the superego. This sort of desire for gratification that comes into conflict with your reality considerations. I want it now, but I can't get it now. right? I want it now, but that would be wrong, right? And so, but that energy doesn't go anywhere. It has to be moved around and manipulated in some way to get it a little bit of what it wants without pissing the superego off too much, right? And the ego is the one that's trying to make those kinds of adjustments and compromises, right? And it's structural in the sense that it feels like there's three parts of your mind that are fighting in this way, right? So it almost has the feeling of this kind of things in your head, right? And so that's where all the interesting stuff happens, when these things conflict with one another, and that this idea that the energy has to go somewhere, this conservation, that energy just that changes forms, it doesn't diminish or expand over time, right? And that what the ego is doing is finding these compromises. Now, all this is just a characterization of the way people work. It doesn't tell you anything about individual differences. So everybody's the same in this way. So then, how does Freud deal with that? How does he get to the point from these elements, of this is the core motivation, these are structural elements, how does it turn itself into personality? And that's where his ideas about growth and development come in. And he uses them to characterize how his people develop in different ways. So, and this is really where Freud's work became, and it was all developing simultaneously with his other ideas about, his ideas about the conscious, the pre-conscious, and the unconscious, and then later on those things developed in the id, ego, and the superego, right? But all sort of at the same time he was developing his ideas about development, right? Because he was working with patients all the time. His chore was to figure out why this person was like this and how to fix it, in his case, because they were people who came in with problems. And one of the things that he noticed very early when he was working, again, he was getting these kind of bottom-of-the-barrel patients, rich women who had some kind of problems, some aristocratic women, and they would come in, and very often what he found is they would recount a tale of being abused as children, right? So they would talk about how some male figure, a father, an uncle, abused them sexually as a child. And Freud's, one of his original ideas was that was the cause of the problems. That these women were being abused, they had some early sexual experience, some abusive sexual experience, and then that was manifested itself in their problems. Right? But as he developed, as he was thinking this through and working with them, his ideas about kind of fantasy life and how ideas get changed and how things get held down in our unconscious, he became convinced over time that the abuse stories that these women were telling weren't real. That they were what he called seduction fantasies. And that in a real sense, he saw the child as almost the sexual aggressor in the situation. That the children were working out something, and they were telling these stories about their fathers and uncles, and it wasn't true. It was some fantasy made up in their head. You can imagine how well that went over with people. Even then, that was a very controversial idea, that somehow children were these quote-unquote sexual beings in a sense, that they were the ones that were sort of playing out these fantasies almost of what they wanted, right? Freud, in his wonderful way, this great term referred to children as being polymorphously perverse. That, again, this idea that it was broader, that his ideas weren't just about sex, again. And it wasn't, when he talked about childhood sexuality, he wasn't really talking about it in the adult sense of that, right? It was this kind of weird, again, this libidinal energy, these gratification desires, and that they moved around in people. And children had the same kind of desires that adults do, but they were sometimes focused on feeding and these other things, and the energy moved around, and they were, I always thought polymorphous perversity was a great name for a rock and roll band, right? And, I just say, I love the term, but it talks about this idea about the energy moving around. And Freud was the one that coined this basic term about erogenous zones. His idea was there was this energy, this core energy, and it moved around and focused on different parts of the body. Right? Where at different times in development, people's energy, their sort of libidinal energy, this sensual / kind of sensual energy was focused in different parts of the body at different times. And it went through a set of invariant stages. So he was working out a developmental theory. He said, here's this energy, and children have this kind of energy, and it moves from different places. And at one point, it becomes kind of like a pseudo-sexual energy. And once you start thinking about it that way, then again, just for laying out the groundwork of this whole idea, right, is he has these concepts of fixation and regression. So essentially, Freud saw life as a minefield, right? So if you're built for gratification, you want to gratify your needs. There's just no way that's going to get. You can't always get what you want. It's just never going to work that way, right? There's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be problems, right? And what Freud said, whenever there's sort of any kind of these problems, and they can be problems of you getting less than you want, getting more than you want, but you become fixated and you leave some of that energy behind, right? And you leave some of that energy behind, and it becomes associated with whatever conflict is going on at your life. Wherever that energy is focused, you leave some of that energy behind, you become fixated, and then consequently, under some stressful circumstances, when you're trying to get things done, that you'll very often regress back to that stage. So if you leave us, and we'll go through all the examples, right? And so you sort of fixate, some energy gets left at a certain time because of some conflict, right? And then under stress later on, you regress back to that stage and show those sorts of ways of trying to get gratification, right? That are from an earlier stage in your life. And it's the timing of those conflicts and the intensity of those conflicts that create individual differences. It depends when the conflict happens, where your energy is focused at that time, so it's where you leave that energy and how you work that out as you become an older person. So again, in his notion, development was really, really crucial. That most of the interesting stuff that happens in terms of you developing as a person happens when you're a child. And it all has to do with this sort of process of fixation, regression, and these invariant stages. So let's talk about his ideas about these different stages. So the first stage that Freud talked about was what he called the oral stage. Right? So each of the stages is associated with an erogenous zone, the part of your body that you get gratification through. So he says, on birth, what the major form of gratification for a baby is sucking. It's eating, it's drinking, right? It's all the energy, all the gratification, the pleasure, right? So we know that you do things, right? We drink and those things to survive, but those things, when you satisfy those urges, right, that's really pleasurable. It's pleasurable to drink when you haven't drunk for a long time, eat when you're hungry, have sex when you want to have sex, right? So those things are gratifying. And so at first the baby is essentially a sucking machine, right? So it gets all of its gratification through the mouth. And of course there's natural conflicts. There's always, because people are these animals that need gratification, right? And society just isn't, things aren't just going to work out the way you want. You know, both because reality doesn't let it happen and society doesn't quite let it happen, right? So things like at some point, you gotta wean, right? Babies like to suck bottles, they like to suck breasts, and at some point they're told, you know, your time's over, dude. And that's not pleasant. He or she's going, wait a minute. I like that, right? So naturally, there's going to be conflict at some point, right? And there's conflict, and mothers and fathers, I had 3 kids, you go through this, you're always worried about they eating too much, are they eating not enough? Some people want to make their babies only eat at certain times. Some people want their babies to eat all the time, and they worry about them not eating. And so all those things can create conflict and fixation, right? Where the child essentially learns something like, oh, you know, if I do this, I get lots of gratification. I feel really good, so I want to keep doing that. Or, boy, I just didn't get enough sucking. Right? And so you kind of get left in those ways. And according to Freud, again, things get stuck, that energy gets stuck. Right? But the child doesn't really want to walk around, right, consciously going, yeah, the reason I just didn't get enough breast when I was younger. Right? That's my big. But it manifests itself in these disguised ways. Everything takes on symbolic form to kind of hide it. The id wants to still get that gratification, right? But the superego can't see it, because then it gets angry and wants to shame you. So it turns into these different things. So and then all of them have to do with these sorts of symbolic manifestations of habits that occur right in the mouth. So things like oral habits, thumb sucking. Kids will do that. Smoking cigarettes, biting your fingernails. I've had a problem all my life. Biting my fingernail. When I get nervous, when I write, I sit and I go, like this, right? And that's the idea. Is that when you're under stress, you regress, right? You go back and you try and say, yeah, and that's all, and I feel better. You smoke a cigarette, oh, you feel better. Right? Those are simple kinds of things that people can do. Eating, overeating, smoking, but it can also manifest itself in these really symbolic kinds of ways, right? A desire for public speaking. Right? I'm fixated in the oral stage. Well, how do I gratify that? By using my mouth to talk at people all the time. Right? Or according to Freud, things like we use the term biting sarcasm, somebody who's really sarcastic and kind of snarky. Right? They're using their mouth to get at people. They want to argue. So anything verbal, anything oral, right? All those stages, those ideas are that you're still working out some energy that you've left in this oral stage, right? In these different symbolic ways. Right? It's really an interesting idea. I think I was going to do this earlier. I'll give you this wonderful quote that just kind of captures the way Freud thought about all these stages. So this is one where he says, no one who has seen a baby sink back satiated from the breast and falling asleep with flushed cheeks and a blissful smile can escape the reflection that this picture persists as a prototype of the expression of sexual satisfaction in later life. Right, so Freud, it wasn't sexual energy, but Freud thought, at least my wife and I used to talk about it as being in a drunken stupor. The baby would sit and suck on the breast for a while and then fall and go, it's just like, this guy really satisfied. It looked like they were drunk and happy, right? So Freud saw it more in a sexual world. But you can see, it's this desire, and it gets gratified. And if that doesn't get gratified, energy gets stuck, and it manifests itself in all these kind of interesting ways. Sometimes in these weird, symbolic ways. So that's the oral stage. At some point, right, the child moves out of that stage where where the energy moves to a different part of the body, according to Freud, and that moves the child in around 18 months or 2 years into what he referred to as the anal stage. And before we do that, let me ask you this. Well, here's a question. Do you think that potty humor is funny? So fart jokes, bathroom humor, things like that. Do you think that's funny or just gross? So people differ a lot on this. Do you think, so A, if you think they're funny, B, if you think they're gross, C, if you have no real opinion. Like, you like potty jokes? Think they're funny, A, gross, B, no real opinion, C. Lots of comedians love potty jokes, right? South Park loves potty jokes. Okay, looks like we got people. What do we got? Most common response, 45% of people think it's funny. Some people have no real opinion. Some people think it's gross, right? And Freud can explain this all to you as why it is that you think that this is true. And so it has to do with what he calls the anal stage. Right, so at some point, again, the energy, the libidinal energy moves naturally from the mouth to this new part of the body, to the anus. Right, and the product of There's a process of defecation. Right? And so Freud, in some sense, and later people have talked about this more, sees this as kind of the first stage in a kid's development of autonomy. That's like the first thing a kid makes. Right? It's like, here's this thing, I did it. I made this thing. Sometimes kids will come to you and say, look, what I made. Right? So in some sense, it's this first kind of act of independence and things like that. And of course, it's fraught with all kinds of potential conflict. Right? Parents think this is gross. It's disgusting. Kids don't think it's gross. Kids just think it's there. It's there. Right? It just happens. But parents, are very conflicted about this. They're either really concerned. Some parents really want those kids to potty train, so that's right in the middle of it. There's this natural conflict. Some point the kid has to learn how to not go to the bathroom in their diaper, but going in. The toilet is sort of the ultimate act of sort of civilized nature, right? And that creates conflict. Parents are either too lenient about it, too strict about it. The child, there's lots of potential for the kids somehow not to gratify, get over gratified, get that energy stuck there in the, whoa. What happened, guys? How long was that staring at there? Pairing with this device was unsuccessful. Why would that be? Okay. Seems pretty successful to me. Sorry about that. So typical conflict, toilet training, control. The child wants to control this thing, right? And is developing a sense of wanting control. The parent wants control. All this conflict. So the typical outcomes, again, are the two basic patterns that Freud sees developing at this stage. Either sort of anal retentive personality, where the child, the parent wants you to go at a certain time, at a certain place. You're saying, no, I don't think so, I'll just keep it. Right? It's mine, I'll keep it, I'm not going to give it away. So Freud would see that, if that's sort of the manifestation of it all, Freud would see that as developing traits like orderliness, like being a control freak, right? Being orderly, being thrifty, frugal, right? Not wanting, if you think of temptation sort of giving it away, then you want to keep it, right? So being cheap and thrifty, stubborn, controlling. And the other sort of manifestation of that, again, is being an anal expulsive. So wanting to give it all away. And these things can, again, not always develop bad traits. Like being in control and being orderly and being conscientious, those are good things, right? And expulsion can be bad, or it can be good. It can be manifest itself as something like generosity, right? Wanting to give things away, but also being messy, or potentially having an interest in scatological potty humor, right? So the idea is, oh yeah, fine. When I talk about potty, that kind of makes me happy. I think those things are funny. Other people who are kind of more, end up more kind of stressed out about it, like, oh no, that's gross. Don't talk about potty stuff ever, ew. Right? So you get those different sorts of things, and it has to do with whether you're over gratified or under gratified, where your parents are mostly kind of just sort of trying to take it away from you. And again, always in Freudian, the problem with Freudian logic or analysis, right, is that anything can almost manifest itself in any way. Right? So things can, we talk about reaction formation, that energy can turn itself into its opposite. Right? So it's not clear if you're having this conflict with your child, really, whether it's going to manifest itself in these retentive traits or these expulsive traits. Freud was very clever about being able to say, oh yeah, that's why I did this, that's why I did that, but, so there's the slipperiness of it. But the basic idea you can see, right, is that if you're having conflict during this stage, you leave that energy behind, and then you, again, try to seek gratification somehow, either from retaining things or giving things away. That's the anal stage. The anal stage goes to, people will differ between 3 and 4 years old. When the child moves into this new stage, again, that energy starts to move around, and in this case, it moves into the sort of part that was the most controversial and the most, potentially difficult to deal with, which is, he called it the phallic stage. And in this case, this is when the energy, this erogenous energy, this libidinal energy moves to the genitals, right? So the child becomes interested in their own genitals, right? And this is when you see children doing things like playing with themselves, you know, just sitting there and playing with their penis or their vagina or whatever it is. And you can imagine how parents respond to that. Not usually well, right? Again, inherent conflict. The child starts to have this sort of, again, in Freud's eyes, it was sort of a pre-sexual awakening, right? Where the origins of this sort of energy in the genital area, phallus just means penis, and in Freud, and we'll see the sort of interesting sex differences and you know, why it is that Freud was very often characterized, and still is characterized as theories of being sexist, right? So he was really interested in men more than he was interested in women in some ways, you know, the patients for women. But again, typical conflict. So when the child starts to have this kind of pre-sexual feelings, begins to masturbate a little bit, right? In the childhood sense of that, and you get into these kinds of conflicts. And this one becomes very intense. The child is older, the energy is kind of more intense. And then Freud saw this as a really crucial stage in the development of both the superego and sex roles. And he saw this path as diverging depending on whether you were a man or a woman, or a boy or a girl, right? And this brings us to the really interesting notion of Freud's ideas about the Oedipus complex. And the story goes something like this. Again, for both sexes, there's a lot of potential conflict here. The child has these kind of pre-sexual feelings and is, you know, developing into a young person with, you know, thoughts and you know, obviously more autonomous and acting in various ways. And the idea is that this whole thing starts to, all this energy becomes very intense. So let's talk about boys first. So this is what Freud was most interested in. He talked about this idea. Again, he was a very literary guy, very well read, and he used a lot of literary allusions in his work. And he referred to this as the Oedipus complex for a reason. Before I talk about one, who knows the story of Oedipus? Roughly. Right? So it goes roughly something like this. Sometimes referred, seen as the iconic Greek tragedy. And there's the basic story is there's a king and queen, and the king learns from some prophecy that his own child, because of a curse, his own son will kill him. And so he decides that he is going to get rid of that son. He just has this son named Oedipus. And he tries to get the wife to kill the son. And the wife can't do it. Can't kill her own son. So she gives it to a handmaid to kill the son. The handmaid can't really do it. I think she leaves him on a mountaintop. And then somebody finds him and he gets raised. Oedipus is raised in a different place. Right? Oedipus at some point finds out from the Oracle of Delphi that he's going to, he learns this terrible fate that he is destined to kill his own father and marry his own mother. Right? He's horrified by this, and he wants to run away from his town. He doesn't want to do that to his own parents. So he goes on his way, and on the way he runs into his father on the road, and ends up getting into a scuffle and kills his own father. Right? Realizing the first part of the prophecy. And then he ends up going back to his home country and ending up becoming kind of a hero, and then he ends up marrying the queen, his own mother. So at one point he finds all this out. He realizes what has happened to him. His mother kills herself. He then finds her dead and takes finds the needles from that are holding her dress together and takes the needles and he pokes his own eyes out, blinding himself. Right? So Freud, that's the basic story of Oedipus Rex, right? And Freud saw this incredible sort of psychological truth in this. And he partly thought that the story was a manifestation of that, right? That people were feeling these things psychologically, and Sophocles essentially wrote it sort of as an inspiration, as psychological inspiration, but he also again thought, literarily it was useful. So the basic process, psychological process that Freud thinks people go through follows that really nicely. So the young boy has this kind of pre-sexual energy. He's spending a lot of time with his mother, as Freud did, right? And he, in a sense, falls in love with his mother, right? In this kind of pre-sexualized sense. So he starts to see himself, boy, here's the mother, and I want to possess her. And then there's his dad that keeps coming home, and he's kind of a jerk, right? In our terms, he brings us home from work, and he does a lot of punishing, a lot of discipline, and I really don't like him. In fact, I really hate him, and boy, would I really like to kill him. And then I can have Mom all to myself. It'll be great, right? He realizes at the same time, however, that Dad's a pretty big dude, right? Dad's this mean, nasty guy, and I don't think I can take Dad in a fair fight, right? And Dad, maybe he's getting the thing, he senses that I don't like Mom, and one thing I really worry about is my penis. And he might cut my penis off, right? That's bad. He's going to take this thing that where my energy is focused right now, and that's Freud's concept, this castration anxiety, right? This sense that we're vying for the mother in this romantic competition, in a sense, right? And then he's afraid that he's going to lose this thing, and so what do? He wants to kill his father, and he has all this energy, he wants to love his mother, right? And the whole thing just kind of explodes in this sort of intense resolution, compromise, where he comes to love his father, identify with his father. This is something that psychologists later have talked about, is the idea of identifying with the aggressor. That sometimes you're so afraid of somebody, you kind of identify with them, come to like them and respect them rather than hate them. So he turns all that hate energy into sort of identification, love. Sees, I want to be like my father. My father has this woman like my mother, so I want to be like her. He internalizes all of this. That's developing his gender role as a male. But it's also that intense energy turns into the superego. So he takes the father disciplinarian and he internalizes that to himself and then becomes his own disciplinarian, has this sense of, you should do certain things, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, and that's the development of the superego. So the superego really comes into full fruition here during this phallic phase. Right? And in a lot of ways, or not in a lot of ways, what's essential to Freud too is that the more intense that conflict, the more power that the superego then ultimately gets, the stronger a superego you develop. The more conflict that you have about loving your mother, wanting to kill your father, the more you become sort of a strict disciplinarian of yourself, having this intense conflict. So again, he wants to love his mother, he wants to kill his father, the whole thing's terrible, and so what happens is he goes through the process of identifying with the father, right? Sort of relinquishing his love for his mother, but sort of taking on the male sexual, the male superego. All the conflict is just too intense that it just has to be repressed, right? So he, in effect, psychologically, symbolically, pokes his own eyes out. He blinds himself to the whole process, just as Oedipus Rex does in the Sophocles play, right? So he saw all this great symbolism in that play. And that's the resolution of this phallic stage is the development of sex roles and superego for males. So what about for women? So is everybody clear on the Oedipus complex and how it plays out? Right? The story has to be different for women, right? Because they don't have the same issues, the same body parts, right? And if Freud really just talks about it in some sense as being, oh, you know, it's just kind of this less intense thing that goes on. His ideas were developed later on, particularly by Carl Jung, who actually gave it this name of the Elector complex. And again, the Elector complex is, you know, Electra was another play by Sophocles that had you know, a female wanting to kill her father, I think, is the story. But again, here's the basic idea goes like this. So the same thing as the boy, the young girl spends a lot of time, has this sexualized energy, spends all her time with her mother. So she sort of starts off loving her mother, seeing her mother as a source of attraction and love and romance, kind of in the same way at the beginning, until she realizes that she really can't fulfill that, right? There's something missing, and there's something missing in her, which is that she doesn't have a penis, right? And so she sees the father and says, oh, well, the father has a penis. I don't have one. Wow, I wish I had a penis. Then I can kind of be with the mother and do all the things, right, in this childhood fantasy kind of world that Freud was imagining. Right, so this concept where the male child experiences castration anxiety, the female child experiences castration, what did I say? Castration anxiety and penis envy. Right? So what's a girl to do? Well, essentially what she says is, well, you know, yeah, I want Dad's got a penis, so yeah, you know, I kind of like his penis. I can do it. Right? I can do that. And you can see this, so that she then sort of turns this energy a little bit into loving the father. Right? And you know, we know that, you know, little girls very often idolize their fathers, and you see that in development. So she develops this kind of pseudo-love connection with the father, but she also identifies with the mother, right? So that the mother, it's like her, is missing this essential thing, penis, and so eventually she kind of figures out, well, yeah, I'm kind of like the mother, and I'm going to identify with her because she's missing the things that I miss, and you know, the sort of intense desire for the father, or the desire for the father, which again isn't as intense in some sense as this mother-son attraction, and everything just kind of dissipates. The child, the female child identifies with the mother, and changes the way she kind of feels about the father back to this normal sort of way. The whole thing's repressed a little bit, but the point that Freud always made is that there is no intense conflict. There isn't the conflict with a boy child, right? That's really this thing where I want the mother. That big guy's in my way. I hate his guts. The whole thing blows up. Now I love the father, and I'm like the father. I don't like the mother anymore. I'm repressed. All that's very intense. All that energy develops into a very intense superego through this conservation process. But with women, the conflict isn't nearly as intense. It kind of just solves itself in a relatively simple way. Therefore, Freud believed that so women don't have a well-developed superego because the energy isn't as intense to begin with. It doesn't manifest itself in this intense kind of disciplinary, this conscience, right? So this is why he said, you know, women don't have it, you know, men, they have the conscience. Women, you know, they're not that much, they don't have that strong a conscience. In fact, that may be part of their psychological problems because they don't have this intense superego to keep them out of trouble, right? Maybe that's why they, you know, manifest all these symptoms all the time. And so somehow the whole thing was wrapped up in the sense that for women it really isn't that intense. That's why women aren't the moral, upstanding moral citizens that men are, right? And maybe that's why they're so crazy, right? So he was seeing all this stuff through his Victorian lens about sexuality, about men, male dominance and female, submission and all these things, and that. So it's really interesting. Again, the core notion here that's so important is that idea of conservation of energy. If the conflict is intense, it creates a strong superego. If the conflict isn't intense, the superego isn't really strong. And that's how it kind of plays itself out. So there's this really intense period during this phallic stage where the children develop their sex roles, develop a superego, the whole thing kind of gets repressed, and then they move on to the next stage, which Freud saw as kind of a, okay. And he called it the latency stage. Right? Where latency is the stage between 6 years and about puberty, where you basically says not really a whole lot going on. Right? There isn't a lot of sexual energy, there isn't a lot of activity or conflict. The child's develop their sexuals, they sort of grow until they become full sexual beings at puberty. Right? And there's this kind of relaxation period, and then you get what he calls the genital stage, which comes on at puberty and goes on, and again, it's where you have mature sexual interests. Again, no longer autoerotic. So you want, so the idea, at first when in the phallic stage, that you're mostly focusing on playing yourself and that, and now as an older person, your sexual interests are directed toward other people. And of course, you're playing out all the issues that used to happen, that have happened to you, all the conflicts and things, manifest themselves in all the interesting sexual diversity there is in people's sexual interests, and of course all the shame and guilt that surrounds sexuality because of all the stuff that's gone on, and loving your mother and all this stuff. So sexuality is sort of naturally wrapped up in all sorts of guilt and everything. But what's important, again, is that even in the genital stage, he doesn't talk much about that developing personality. To Freud, all the interesting stuff goes on in those first 6 years, right? That's when your personality really develops. As you go through the oral, anal, and phallic stage, and leave energy in all these different places, in different forms, and progress to it back when you're older. So again, summary of the stage theory: children leave energy behind, and again, at almost every stage. So Freud, in Freud's world, people just don't come out unscathed. One of his pretty famous books was called The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. So he saw this as, you just can't get through the stages without conflict. And so everybody leaves a little bit, everybody's a little, but you've got some people have really intense things that may happen at the oral stage or the anal stage or the phallic stage, and those are the ones that really leave their mark in developing your personality. And again, it's all about the timing of the conflicts and how they manifest. Whether you become an outgoing person who likes to speak and do things, or a introvert, frugal, somebody who's got lots of weird oral habits, or people who are hung up about various things. All those things develop through this process of fixation and regression. Any questions about any of this stuff? Really fascinating, really well-known ideas. Some of these things, again, have seeped into the culture in really deep ways. Many psychologists were influenced by this notion of stages, these invariant stages that children go through in development. Again, if you had a developmental psychology class, most developmental psychologists don't think that anymore. But it's really interesting, very attractive idea, right? That there's certain kind of invariant stages that children go through at different ages, and that helps to understand their personality. So that's his theory of psychosexual stages. That's his idea about growth and development and how they manifest themselves in individual difference. So then we've been through motivation, structure, growth and development. I just want to talk a little bit, and we're going to talk more about psychotherapy and all those issues at the very end of the class, but talk a little bit about psychotherapy. This is really central to Freud's development of his ideas, right? That's how he developed his ideas, not collecting data, experiments or anything, but working with patients. And he did this from the very beginning of his career all the way through, these very intensive sessions, meeting with people usually once or twice a week, sometimes many times a week, sometimes for years, right? And so the idea was, again, and this is the crucial, bigger point that I want you to always take away from this stuff, right? Which is that how you think problems get caused determines how you think problems should be fixed. So if your theory is that X is how a problem gets solved, then you have to decide that how do I fix X, right? So for Freud, the problem is these fixations, right? You've got energy fixated at these past stages of development, And in order to fix a person's symptoms, you've got to figure out where they're fixated, and then you've got to help them work through it in some way to resolve that conflict in some way, bring it to consciousness, work through it in some way to get that energy released so the person can then remove their symptoms. Now, this isn't a simple process at all. Everything's hidden under layers and layers of symbolism and defense mechanisms, right? And so it took years to go through this process. People can't tell you why they're having problems, right? They'll tell you things, but in Freudian, from a Freudian perspective, the psychoanalyst is like a detective trying to sort through, uncover all the, get around the defenses to find out what the source of that sort of fixation is, right? So you've got to identify the conflict and the fixation and work through it to release the energy. And again, it's not easy in a lot of different ways. And so he developed some simple techniques, some simple and some not so simple techniques, right, to try and figure out what that fixation, what's the problem, right, which is the first step you've got to get through. And again, he tried things originally like hypnosis, so trying to get people to relax in the state where they would be more like where their defenses, the idea that sort of your superego was relaxed at that point, and you can get people to do that. He didn't find that a very useful thing. He developed more of these talking cures where he would talk to people, but he did sort of similar things. The idea was always to somehow catch the superego off guard somehow. Because the superego, the watchful eye of the superego is what's making the ego keep everything down and won't let it up into consciousness. But if you kind of slide around the guard somehow, hey, look over there, you can get around. So he did things like free association. It was a technique that he started to develop with some of his colleagues, right? The simple idea, you guys know what free association is. I give you a word, dog, and you say, I make you say the first thing that comes to your mind as soon as you say it. Dog, say it. Refrigerator. Penis. So that's the kind of stuff, right? So you'll get people into this rhythm where they be saying, as quickly as they could. The idea is if you do it, say it quickly, you get it. It's not like the IAT we talked about, the implicit association test. If you kind of get people to do things fast, they'll say things that they just come out, right? And so they would go through this process of trying to see what people would say in response to certain words. And that the idea is that sometimes the truth sort of slip out around what they were wishing, right? In some way. He also, again, was interested in this, what he called the analysis of resistance. So because of these sort of defense mechanisms, right? So what he realized is the things that people didn't want to talk about the most were the ones that he thought were the most interesting, right? For where they resisted. If you'd say penis, they say, oh, I don't want to say anything about that. Well, why don't you? Well, then okay, sort of explore that or whatever it is, right? So the places that they kind of pushed back, right, were the things that he thought were interesting. And a whole while he was trying to sort out, right, what's really going on, what's the nature of people's conflicts. Another technique that he used, and what again he's particularly famous for, is the analysis of dreams. Right? So again, one of his where all of psychoanalytic theory really began was in Freud's fascination with dreams. So again, dreaming is this really, really interesting phenomenon. We don't talk about it in this class. I don't know if it's in the B class or the A class, but they talk about the latest work on dreams. But it's fascinating. It's really vivid. How many people dream really vividly? Remember their dreams every night. How many people don't remember their dreams very well? I actually don't remember mine well. You can actually work on it if you want. You can try to write them down. Wake up, the first thing you wake up and try to write them down, try to remember. Anytime you wake up at night, you can do it better. But it's this fascinating phenomenon that people have this rich sort of mental life. And Freud became fascinated with this as his theories developed as, again, what he called the royal road to the unconscious. Right? So he thought that dreams were this time when the superego is kind of relaxed. Your defenses are down, you're sleeping, right? And that's when the id kind of plays its role, right? For all the things that that you want, you wish, and desire sort of bubble up and manifest themselves in this kind of harmless way, in this dream way. And again, he saw them ultimately as a compromise. Right? So it wasn't like at that time the superego's not around, or the superego, when you wake up and you say, dude, that was a perverted dream you had last night, you should be ashamed of yourself. Right? So you can't just dream everything you want either, right? So according to Freud, again, the same process going to work. So in this case, he called it the dream work, right? It's this process that the id or the superego goes through to, in a sense, disguise the true meaning of the dream. So even dreams aren't telling you exactly what's wrong, what people's actual conflicts are. Dreams have to be interpreted and worked through and thought through, and then layers of symbolism sort of pulled away from them. Right, so the first thing he does is he makes this distinction between what he calls the manifest content and the latent content of the dream. So the manifest content of the dream is just the actual stuff that you remember about the dream. So when you tell the story, oh yeah, I was riding on a horse down, and then I saw my mother, and all of a sudden we were in Mexico, and then this thing happened. My mother turned into a high school principal, and then they yelled, right? So you could tell the stories of their dreams. They're often really weird like that, right? There are people turn into from one person to another. You just transport yourself from one place to another, right? And at the time in your dream, it doesn't seem that weird, right? You just sort of take it for granted that all of a sudden you're in a different place, or that somebody's a different person, right? Or that somebody, who's some different part of your life is there in this part of your life, and right? But all that's just this kind of, that's the manifest content. And what Freud wanted to get to is what he called the latent content of the dream. The dream, he saw dreams as wish fulfillment, right? And what the underlying meaning was. What was really the conflict that you're trying to work out there, right? And so you could take what people described with their dreams, how they talked about their dreams, how they resisted certain interpretations of their dreams, and use that to try and figure out what that dream really meant. Right? Because at least it was close to the surface. It was something that was more raw reflection of your desires than other sorts of things, because the superego is kind of in the last state. Right? And there were certain kinds of principles, just like those defense mechanisms we talked about, that operate. Again, these are just very exactly the same sort of things as defense mechanisms. So things like displacement. Right? So you may get really angry at somebody. You don't know why you're angry at that person. You killed them in your dream, or you had sex with them in your dream, or something. They're not everybody who you would imagine. Well, sometimes there's a person who you really want to have sex with or kill, but you displace it onto somebody else. Right? And it's all visual representation. So ideas become represented visually. Right? So sex, again, very often will manifest itself as a phallic symbol, as a penis, or anything that's hollow or sort of roughly cylindrical as a vagina, right? So things become physically represented as objects in your dreams, right? Things and disguise. So a horse symbol, riding a horse, very often people will interpret that as a symbolic visual representation of sex, right? So you're riding this horse. Right? And you don't want to dream about sex, the superego can't handle that, so you turn it into this other thing and represent it in this visual way. Condensation, right? So he talked about the idea that you only have so long dreaming that the ego will essentially take something and one thing or one person can represent lots of different things. All get kind of condensed into one thing. That's why people will turn from one person to another, or a place will turn from one thing to another, or one symbol, one person can represent 5 different things to him, right? So they were all condensed in this really purified form, where things have multiple meanings. And he also talked about, as we know, people also have, one of the hardest things for him to kind of understand was the idea that not all of the dreams really are wish fulfillments. We have dreams like we're dying and we die, or you're naked in class, or you're late for an exam. You're going, I didn't wish that, right? So those don't seem like wish fulfillments, but he talked about these anxiety dreams. Again, it's manifesting real fears that people have, right? So sometimes fears get represented. Sometimes again, wishes simply get turned into their opposite, right? So what you want actually may be represented in a dream is what you fear, or who you kill may be somebody who you really don't want to kill at all. Again, there's all this weird symbolic slipperiness in Freud, where things, energy can change forms in all kinds of right ways. But again, in this kind of primary process world where dreams live, there's no logic. There's no things can just be turned from one thing to another. So Freud would spend, wrote several books. His most famous book that really began the whole psychoanalytic process was the interpretation of dreams. And he was continued to be fascinated with dreams his whole life because he saw them as so meaningful. Now, again, I want to just say really quick that modern researchers don't really believe that this is the way dreams operate. That the content of your dream is really kind of more random. You're just making sense out of things that happen to you. But Freud saw them as deeply meaningful. And again, many people for many years have done it. Freud wasn't the first one to think dreams were meaningful. Right? People have been seeing dreams as prophecies of the future and psychologically meaningful for thousands of years before this. Freud picked up on that idea and played it out through his theory, right? And saw them as this really important way to figure out what the core problems that people have. Yep. Another technique, later on, Freud didn't use these very much, but just to kind of talk about some other ways that Freudian type theorists and psychoanalysts, therapists, try to diagnose the problems of people and using Freudian logic. One of those things is called projective tests. I don't know about projective tests. And we talked about the idea of projection, that people will, if they have some sort of conflict in themselves, they'll very often project it onto somebody else's way of seeing it there. Kind of getting it away from you, not having to take responsibility because you see it someplace else. This really relies on that same idea. That if you show a person some kind of an ambiguous stimulus, that they'll project their wishes and conflicts onto it. Right? That you can show people something, ask them to tell you about it, and that will reveal the sorts of stories they tell will reveal the kind of conflicts and things that they're experiencing. There's two very famous versions of these, the Rorschach ink blot tests and the thematic apperception tests. And they're really very similar. So, you guys have seen Rorschach ink blot test, developed by a guy named Rorschach. And it's really pretty simple. Essentially what it did is filled some ink onto a piece of paper, you fold that paper over, and you unfold it so that it's perfectly symmetrical but nonsensical sorts of symbols. And he would tell people, like, what's this one up here on the left, upper left for you. So what do you see there? Anybody want to tell me what they see there? Well, somebody tell me what you see. Raise your hand. What do you see? Two guys wearing hats, pushing their hands together. Anybody see something different? One more. That's really twisted, by the way. You really should see somebody. Anybody? Go on, somebody else. You see something? Go ahead. Eating dinner? Oh, interesting. Right, so you can see, it's not clear what it is. A lot of people seem like bears playing patty cake or something. And this one, later on, they became color, but originally they were just this. And the idea was, we just have people tell stories about those things, then analyze the stories, and try to figure out, well, what kind of conflict. Somebody says, I see two, I see my mother and my father having sex and then trying to kill each other. And I don't want to make fun of it, but that's the idea, is that somehow they would reveal their conflicts by simply talking about things that weren't really interesting at all. The thematic apperception test is exactly the same notion, except for they would show people pictures like this. These are actually from the thematic apperception test, and then they had people tell a story. I think they did a little bit of this when we talked about that bridge study where the person meets the woman meets the guy on the bridge, on the shaky bridge, and they have them do a projective test. And they found more sexual content in the stories if they were on the shaky bridge than on the firm bridge, right? So people still use these kind of techniques somewhat, and they get people to tell stories. So tell me what's going on. You can imagine somebody telling a story, I don't know, about killing somebody, I just killed her and I'm walking away, or I have other, more positive ones. My mother's looking over my shoulder all the time, or my mother's looking out for me, or my grandmother, or gardening. You see that there might be meaning that people could extract from those kinds of things. And the idea is that people don't know that they're doing that, right? That they're just telling a story, and that therefore it sort of slips out around the superego's watchful eye to reveal their true conflict. And that's really the hard part, right? So that's why psychoanalysis takes so long, because the whole process of trying to uncover people's conflicts that they've repressed in various ways and covered up and manifest themselves in this kind of symbolic way. And all these techniques, dream analysis, pre-association, projective tests, are all ways to try and diagnose these issues. Any questions about that? Good. So let me just talk a little bit in summary about the psychoanalytic perspective. I talk about it a lot because it's so famous, so influential. It's one of those things that is, an essential part of any liberal arts education, right? So if Freud comes up, people make Freud jokes in educated company, right? You want to be able to go, I get it. I get the old Freud jokes you're making. So because people understand this and know it, it's been hugely influential. And it has many powerful strengths, right? So it's incredibly comprehensive. So Freud's work is really a theory of everything. So his work began as a theory of dreams, became a full theory of personality, a theory of development. It spread into the world of art and anthropology and literature and cultural analysis. Freud, in his later work, was really analyzing sort of cultural development. He's almost like a lay archaeologist, sociologist, trying to talk about the nature of civilization and how it developed. So there's huge ideas that really were sprung from only a couple different concepts. When I say it's parsimonious, there's sort of some key things that Freud talks about, right? Ego, superego, regression, fixation, these sorts of things. And he plays those out in this way to sort of explain lots and lots of stuff. The notion of the unconscious was this powerful idea that nobody had really talked about this before, the idea that so much of what determines our behavior and our feelings are these unconscious influences, things that we all accept now. Right? We all kind of, in common parlance, we know that people do things for reasons they don't understand. Right? All that was Freud. And that idea was very powerful. Still, modern social psychology is very, very influenced by the ideas of the unconscious and much of the stuff that we do for reasons that we don't quite understand. Not in the real Freudian sense, but again, the notion of unconscious is very powerful. It captures important conflicts, I think, between desire, reality, and morality. That's what I've always thought that the theory made a lot of sense to me when I heard it. Yeah, I'm stuck in these situations. I want something, but I can't quite get it, or I don't think I should get it. And, that kind of captures a lot of what seems to people to describe the kind of conflicts they have in their lives, and so that made it, again, hugely influential in lots of different ways. Right? Those ideas are really foundational to modern thinking, Freud's are. At the same time, there were lots of weaknesses, right? So there was clearly an overemphasis on instinctual gratification of sex. Freud thought everything really came down to this basic animal urges. We could take those things and really explain everything. And again, was criticized a lot for kind of being a little obsessed with sex. And again, I want to defend him a little bit, that it really wasn't sex in that really traditional sense. It's just kind of sensual energy kind of thing. But still, that's a reasonable critique. That it was culturally bound, right? You can kind of see that it emerged out of a particular world. Repressed sexual world in Victorian, 19th century Europe, where women were didn't have full human rights and all those kinds of things. You could see him, in a sense, justifying those things or explaining those things. And seeing that it probably was the case that many of these women were being sexually abused. He turned that into something, it's just a fantasy. So, again, anti-feminist, this idea that women have weak superegos, and they really didn't develop quite the same way. And there's lots of other elements that sort of seem to downplay and degrade women. And from a scientific standpoint, right, it's basically unfalsifiable. What's really, he didn't develop it, he developed based on clinical insight. First of all, not on data. But then, when it comes to be falsified, can you make a firm prediction that, according to Freudian theory, X should happen? If X happens to you at this age, is this going to manifest in your personality? Well, Freud, maybe. Might lead you to be anal explosive, might lead you to be anal retentive, I don't know, I can explain either of those. Right? He can explain a lot of things because of this complicated psychological process, this dream work, and that things could turn into their opposites, and things could be displaced. And then, you love her, but you really love her, and so does that mean you really love her? Well, it could mean you love her. And so it's hard to get firm hypotheses that are testable and that Freud couldn't somehow slip out of a little bit, right? So the theory is difficult that way. And again, data since Freud have not been kind to Freudian theory for the most part, right? Especially his theory of development, right? The whole notion that children go through invariant stages isn't really supported. His basic idea about these different stages don't really hold together well. The notion of repression is really controversial, whether people can really repress memories or not. His ideas about dreams really haven't been well supported in any way, and a lot of these things have been tested. So a lot of the ideas, the ones that could be tested, really haven't played out well. Right? So as a modern theory of psychology, it's not really a very good one. Right? Probably a lot of the stuff that we're talking about doesn't really capture reality very well. Nonetheless, right, I think it's really important to spend a couple of days talking about it because the ideas are so powerful, they're so influential, so interesting. They show up in so many different places, and so much of it, I still argue that some of it really has a lot of resonance, right? This idea that people are in this kind of conflict between what they want and what they want to believe, what they need to believe. That's really the basis of a lot of my research. I've been interested over the years in motivated reason, why people kind of come to believe the things they want to believe, right? And it's really ultimately that Freudian notions are there, right, are the inspiration for those things. So Freudian theory has been very influential. We also want to talk about it because it's kind of the contrast point for everything that goes past. So what we're going to talk about next time are the neo-Freudians, the people who came immediately after him, and some of the people whose work was really a direct response, right? So the one reason to talk about Freud, even though he might not have been right about things, is that subsequent researchers began their work either by agreeing with Freud or disagreeing with him in various ways. And so we're going to lay that out and sort of contrast it with some other different theorists and how they try to explain personality in different ways. Any questions about any of this? Comments about anything? Today we're 5 minutes early. You guys are out of here. We'll see you on Tuesday.